All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're stepping into the ring for one of the biggest nutritional debates out there, plant protein versus animal protein. For a long time, one of them has been seen as the undisputed champion. We're going to break down all the latest science to see if that's really still the case. You know, for years, we've all been told there's a clear winner when it comes to the best protein source. But is that actually true? We're going to look at the research and finally settle the score between these two heavyweights. So, let's meet our contenders. In this corner, we have the reigning champ, animal protein. It's been hailed forever as the absolute king for building muscle. And in the other corner, we have the challenger, plant protein, which has been getting a ton of buzz for its amazing health benefits. Let's see how they really stack up.
Ding ding, round one. This is the question literally everyone asks. Which one is better for building muscle and getting stronger? For decades, the answer seemed pretty darn obvious.
See, it all kind of boils down to this idea of protein quality. Animal proteins are what scientists call high quality. Think of it this way. They're like a perfect toolkit, with all 9 of the essential amino acids our bodies can't make themselves. Plus, they're super easy to digest. That's what's made them the go-to for athletes forever.
But hold on. What happens when we zoom out from those short-term lab studies and actually look at what happens in the real world? You know, over weeks and months of actual training? Well, a massive scientific review decided to find out.
And when the scientists pooled all the data together, they found something, well, pretty shocking. When it comes to building total muscle mass and gaining overall strength, there was no significant difference between the two. Turns out, as long as people get enough protein, the source just doesn't seem to matter.
So here's the bottom line, the crucial point. When you make sure you're getting enough total protein and enough of this key amino acid called leucine, which is like the trigger for muscle growth, plant proteins work just as well as animal proteins, period. However, the fight isn't totally over. It's not quite that simple. When we look a little closer at the data, a small but really important detail pops up. The story has a bit more nuance.
Okay, so while the total amount of muscle gained was the same, the research did show a tiny advantage for animal protein in one specific area, your body composition. It was slightly better at increasing the percentage of muscle you have compared to fat, and this little effect was most noticeable in younger folks, under 50. So for that very specific goal, animal protein might have a small edge.
Okay, so muscle building is one thing, but what about the long game? Let's talk about overall long-term health. We're moving on to round 2, and believe me, this is where the story takes a really dramatic turn. I want you to just look at this number for a second. 27%. That is a massive reduction in risk for one of the biggest killers worldwide. So what on earth does it represent? This number comes from these huge long-term studies out of Harvard, and what researchers found was that people who had a higher ratio of plant to animal protein in their diet had a staggering 27% lower risk of coronary heart disease. That's compared to people whose diets were mostly animal protein.
So that begs the question, right? Why? If protein is protein when it comes to your muscles, why is there such a gigantic difference when it comes to your heart?
The answer is all about something called the protein package. You see, protein never comes all by itself. Animal protein, well, it often brings along some baggage, like saturated fat and cholesterol. Plant protein, on the other hand, comes bundled with stuff our bodies absolutely love: fiber, antioxidants, and healthy fats. It's not just the protein, it's the company it keeps.
Now, even with all this evidence, a lot of old myths about plant protein are still hanging around. So let's do a quick-fire myth-busting round and just clear the air. First up, the big one. I'm sure you've heard this a million times, that plant proteins are incomplete, meaning they don't have all the essential amino acids.
So here's the deal. As long as you eat a good variety of plant foods, we're talking beans, lentils, nuts, grains, throughout your day, your body gets every single thing it needs. You don't have to stress about combining them at every single meal. Oh, and by the way, some plants like soy and quinoa are complete proteins all by themselves.
Okay, next myth up. Are plant proteins just harder for our bodies to absorb and actually use? Well, while some raw plant foods can be a little tough to digest, it turns out simple preparation makes a world of difference. The act of cooking or sprouting or fermenting, it breaks down the stuff that gets in the way of absorption, basically unlocking all their nutritional power. So, after all the rounds, after all the evidence, what's the final verdict? Well, it's not really about declaring one winner. It's about understanding the science and then finding the right balance for your own personal goals.
Let's put this into perspective. Right now, the average American diet has a plant-to-animal protein ratio of about 1 to 3. But that Harvard research suggests that for the best heart health, we should be aiming for a ratio that's much closer to 1 to 1. So the key isn't about total elimination. It's about making a significant shift in that balance.
And you know what? Shifting that balance is way easier than you might think. You can start by just limiting red and processed meats. Then, try to actively replace them with things like poultry and fish, or even better, with powerhouse plant sources like nuts and legumes. The goal is simple. Just try to prioritize plants when you can.
And as Dr. Frank Hu from Harvard puts it, this shift isn't just about our own personal health. It's a move that helps our bodies for sure, but it also benefits the long-term health of the entire planet. It's really a win-win.
So, at the end of the day, this big debate isn't about one protein landing a knockout punch. For building muscle, it turns out both contenders are surprisingly well matched. But for your long-term health, the evidence points to a pretty clear advantage for plants. So the real question isn't which one is better anymore. It's what's the right balance for you?